Yesterday in class, we read an excerpt from Farewell to Manzanar, a historical narrative. And as we read, I asked you to make questions that came to your mind as you were reading. Just thoughts that came to your mind about the counts, the Japanese internment counts, and other things that you wondered about. So, I'd like for a couple of you to share a question that you had about the reading from yesterday. Who would like to share? Okay, Rico?
What happened if the Japanese kids that were in the camp, what happened if they refused to stay there?
I think that's a great question. Rico wants to know what happened if a kid or a family refused to go. And I think Rico feels that way because Rico probably sees himself saying, I'm not going. And he can relate to a person who would say, I'm not going to the Japanese internment camp. So that's a great question, and that's something that he thought about. Who has another question? Fusil?
What are the implications of Executive Order 9066?
That's a very deep question too. What are the implications of the executive order? Remember, the executive order is what caused the Japanese Americans to have to go to the camp. So what are the implications? Reword that for us. What does it mean? What are the implications?
What does it mean?
What does it mean? Okay?
Like, what are the standards?
Okay. Exactly what does Executive Order 9066 cause everyone to have to do? Maybe that's a good way of putting it. All right. Anybody else have a question that they want to share before we get started? Logan?
What happened to the belongings left behind by Japanese Americans?
That's a very good question. Think about Wakasuki had to leave everything. Her family had to pack up and leave all their belongings to go to the internment camp. So what happened with the things that her parents, with their wealth, with their property, with the things they had accumulated, what happened to that while she and her family were in the internment camps? That's a good question. All right, well, we have time for one more. Samantha?
Why were the Japanese Americans considered threats to American national security?
That's an excellent question. None of this would have happened if the Japanese Americans weren't considered threats to national security. So for some reason, they were perceived as threats to the American national security during World War II. So we're going to start off with that. I want you to think about your audience for your presentation. Your audience for your presentation is someone who knows nothing about the Japanese American internment camps. So you're going to present to your audience the information that caused the Japanese Americans to be targets, the implications of the executive order, information like Rico has asked and like Logan has asked, what happens to the people who don't go? What happens to their property while they're gone? You're going to create a PowerPoint that details all of that information. So I want you to take a look at your questions. I've compiled a list of all the questions that were created by students yesterday about the Japanese internment camps. You're going to use these questions, and there are lots of questions. You're only going to have to choose 10. Actually, you're only going to choose 8. And then you're going to come up in your group with 2 other questions. Now, Rico may be really skilled in one area, and he may have a background with something that he can bring to the table in his group. So if before you ask me a question about your assignment and about the information that you find on the internet, I want you to discuss it as a group. And I want you to bounce your ideas off of each other as a group. You're going to create these slides, and you need to bring in images, photographs, pictures, anything that you can find on the internet, and then document information that explains whichever question it is that you're attempting to answer. What questions do we have about the assignment before we get started? Okay, if at any time you have a question or if at any time you run across a really good website that you think we should share with the other students in the room, I'd like for you to raise your hand, call me over, and I'll try to go around and share that with groups. I may have you go around and share that with groups. Okay, so let's get started. Call me over if you have questions. I'll be around from group to group. That's a good point. You may choose the ones that are the most interest to your group. Choose to address the topics that are most interesting to your group. Every year, that group is choosing questions that they're most interested in finding. So if each person in your group chooses at least one question that you're interested in finding the answer, then you would have almost all of your slides covered. Okay?
What tree?
Yeah, that's what I did.
I'm
Number
doing
five.
I think it might be a good idea if y'all have, even if you can't log into your Gavel account,
I know, that's
you
what
have
I
your
did.
computer on and you're searching Google for information related to the question. So even if you can't log into Gavel, if you can go ahead and be researching and answering one of these questions, I would have my computer on for that.
So which one
So number
y'all
9, 10,
7.
5.
That's what I do you know?
They had,
Oh, really? I think number 4 would be alright.
Okay, now
so which one of which she had her grandmother, her mom?
She had a lot of her siblings with her.
Yeah, her siblings.
But most of the time, one of their dads gone to jail.
Her dad was gone to jail, and some of the men were actually gone fighting in the war. And remember yesterday in the story, what did Wackasee say happened to her brother?
Number 14.
Do y'all remember? Was he at the camp, he and his wife? They were displaced. They were in another camp, and they were, yeah. So that's a very good question. That's something you can address, even if you don't have it on here. That's why I left blank spaces for you to add a question that you come across as you're reading. You may say, hey, I'd like to know more about this. So add that question to the list. That's a good idea, Rico. Good question. Yeah, you can create one PowerPoint, but you can share your slides. So if he's looking, you can create his slides. I'd like for you to try to at least work together as you're going. Like, I don't want him just to do something and you just. You're looking for information to answer the question. And then sometimes there's a word or an image that correlates with the information that you find. And you probably are gonna need, you're going to have to interact as a group to get this done. You're gonna have to talk to each other to get this accomplished, because as he's reading, he might find something about one of the other questions that one of you is more interested in. How have you all broken this out?
These are the ones that are in there. We can all look on.
The only problem when you divide your questions like that, everybody takes the same time.
I'll look up these 9, but we're deleting concession.
Remember, whatever question he's trying to answer, you all also can have input, and you may find information related to that. So I hate to see you just divide.
Already know
and
what's
like,
going on.
I like you to try to work together to answer each topic together. So if you're looking at education, then everybody should be trying to find out something about what happened to the Japanese Americans education. And everybody can be reading about that. What do you think? Sound better? Because that way you're not so isolated, and Corey may read something and have questions about it, and you guys can discuss it, instead of him just handling his questions and just handling, medical treatment, and everybody's working together on the same topic, and it keeps you all together, and you can bounce ideas off each other.
Go to the webinar.
What do you want to move around over here, so you feel like you can move around? So whenever you're comfortable.
Just give me
World War II started in 1939.
No, I don't think that, okay, here's one thing I want you to remember. You have this great source in front of you, okay? And remember, yesterday we looked at this, and this is part of the executive order. And it's not the entire executive order, but it's a piece of it, where they were given the instructions to the Japanese. It authorized Japanese relocation. So it was an order signed by the president. And where did it appear, Rico? Where did they see it? You just said it a second ago. Yeah.
It ended in 1945. I think it lasted 6 years and 1 day.
Yeah, but that's not answering.
6 years, 1 day, yeah. September 1st, 1939 to September 2nd, 1945.
Yeah, but the dates of the
You know what?
war isn't exactly saying why the Japanese Americans were considered a threat.
Because we were at war with
They bombed
the.
That does, but the actual dates of when it started and ended.
Oh no, I'm just doing it out of mind because I want to know.
How many did you say you said to the
Hey guys, Shannon has found a good source that she's going to come around and share with everybody. So she's going to bring her Chromebook over to the different groups and show you a source that she's found that has a lot of information that can be applicable to what you're doing. Now, tell them why that's such a good source.
Is
Tell
that the
them,
father of?
see if you can get in a good spot and show Blair, and she can show Samantha, and on and on.
Did you know Stalin was our ally in World War II?
Are you on Wikipedia? Do you remember what we said about
I just
Wikipedia?
know the dates of these artists.
Well, I would use Wikipedia for you. Because Morgan is the kind of kid who goes on Wikipedia and changes information. I could see him doing that.
I've tried.
That's because
They won't let me do it sometimes.
You have? I could see you as an editor for Wikipedia, so there we go. So I would not use that.
when it's like raining outside and I can't get out and go to it, I have to have something.
I agree, you have to. Okay, so focus on this.
That was one of the questions still. We had that question on our page.
Finish that quick.
Question for number 5.
Is that something y'all are interested in? What have you found as an answer? I've been
Did you?
Was there a policy in place for this?
I haven't found
You haven't found that?
They're talking about a guy who died recently in an article though.
Who was his child in the camp?
He refused to go though, and he never went. He just went to jail for it.
So, wow, as a child, he went to jail?
He went to child.
How old was he?
I think he was middle-aged, but he died of Alzheimer's like in his 90s.
Really? Well, that's interesting. Pull that article out.
Something like that. I
So-
didn't see much of it.
What you read is, he wrote an article about someone who refused to go to the camp and was sent to jail. So that may be an answer. Now, is he honored by standing there wearing?
Yeah, that's like his son, I believe. I'm not sure though.
Well, you know what? This could be very personal. So instead of focusing on what happened if he refused to go, you guys could change your slide to say, here's an example of what happened to someone who refused to go. So you could change your whole slide, and that'd be a different take than what all the other groups have. So you could use that article as your basis for number 5. I like that idea. I mean, aren't you more interested in him as in the person than just the whole concept? Then use that. That'd be very good. Make some notes on that. Do you need a pen? Do you have your pen? That's great. And then you can import that image.
You can?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can.
There you go. Perfect.
Alright, well, just read up on it. Tell y'all what I read. Okay.
Okay.
From Washington State Development.
And extended inland into southern Arizona.
I found out how their school was.
Tell us about it.
30 days of the Japanese people, children education, and they had education facilities were set up, and but the materials weren't efficient enough, like they weren't very good, like the books and all that.
Who are the teachers? That's a great start on their education. So they didn't have ample supplies.
And the school building was like, the school facilities were like, they said like a prison, so pretty much prison walls, and wasn't very big. So I guess they had, I didn't read a lot, too much, I just read like, I read that stuff, and then it said it was like a prison cell walls with like, it was really little, and it didn't have very many windows.
So it was not the best conducive, one of our vocabularies wasn't conducive to the learning environment. If this is something, seeing with your mom being a teacher, that may be something you're interested in finding more about, then don't stop right there. Keep going, and that can be the slide that you focus on. Okay guys, in just a second we're going to take a little time out, and I'm going to ask your group to share some information, some fact, something that you found that is surprising to you, is shocking to you, is very relevant to you. Just one fact from each group. So right now I want you with your group to discuss your fact that you want to present, and I want you to choose a spokesperson to share that with the whole class. Okay?
So at this time, all teachers and students should report to homeroom.
Okay, guys. We're running out of class time. So hopefully everybody learned something that you didn't know previously, and tomorrow you can come back with a renewed interest in the Japanese internment camps, and we'll pick up where we stopped today. If you would take your Chromebooks and bring them back up here and stack them neatly. I'm not going to make you plug them in today because we will be short on time. And take your packets with you. Do not lose them.